Lunch is supposed to start at 12:30. So we have about 15 minutes for a few quick comments, some announcements, and some requests from you. Thank you, Phil. This is an informal group, so we can be informal. So our schedule for today is lunch at 12:30, and then on our schedule we have Peter Clark is going to talk about the history of photography or something like that. And he has a full hour scheduled. We'd like to start that early if we can, if we finish lunch early, and we can wrap up early and be on our way, which is a good thing. But our formal agenda is lunch at 12:30, speaker from 2 to 3, and social time from 3 to 3:30, and then we pack up and go. I do have some notes here on things I want to cover with you. Let me get down to my list of notes. Why do we always live in the world of paper?
Because we can't do without it.
We can't do without it, that's right. Computers were supposed to change that, they've just made it worse. I want to extend thanks to my friend Dave Montero, who's over here in the blue t-shirt, preparing a video for us. He's done the last 5 or 6 meetings, I think, David. David is from the Lakeville Cable TV Company, and we have an arrangement with them. They've been very good to us, and we try and be good to them. But they do put our videos after editing. They put them on YouTube, and I think we've done a pretty good job getting the links to those on our website. A little more about that in a minute. I also want to note that we have 3 guests from the credit union, which has also been very, very good to the PRA. As you know, the Direct Federal Credit Union basically funds our spring annual meeting, which is the big meeting. They pay for it, so we extend an invitation to them. And with us today is Kristen Johnson, Cass Martin, and Mike Farrer. Sitting in the back, they want to be away from everything. Every time you use your Visa card or write a check from Direct Federal Credit Union, you think of these folks. Please. I do want to make a note of, as we try and do every year, of the board of directors who put a lot of time into managing our business and mostly preparing our 2 meetings in the spring and the fall and the newsletter, as well as the website. That would be Ruth Scanlon, who is our president. Ruth is not here. She lives in I should be playing Ruth's role here. I am playing Ruth's role. Ruth is in North Carolina. Bob Ruxlow is our treasurer. Peter Clark is here as our secretary. Mary McCann is here. Drew Webb, Paul Lubin, Dan Sensi, Karen Friedman. Jim Bodkin is in Georgia. Phil Sousa is here. Bo Stebbins is here. And I'm Don Foster, the vice president. Among other things, I hook up the wires. That's no small task. Okay. Actually, finding the wires sometimes is the hard part. And already just seeing the wires is a hard part. John McCann asked me to remind you that on the table is a page from our newsletter, and in the box in the center of the front page there's a short clip about the Jubilee short story collection instructions. He'd like you to take these, read these. They'll be in the newsletter which is online if you don't get it at home. But in essence, we're looking for people to compose and submit short stories about their interesting years at Polaroid. Nothing insulting, please. But some of us have some interesting, amusing stories to tell. Does that cover it, John?
Thank you.
Good. I do want to touch very quickly on several projects that are going on. These are the result of the survey that we did several years ago. We took the feedback from many people and distilled it, and we came up with 4 or 5 punch list items that we wanted to accomplish. The first was a request for an online payment scheme so people could pay their dues, among other things, directly without having to write a check, put a stamp on an envelope, and send it in. We accomplished that with the help of the credit union and a lot of hard work from the three folks at the back who I mentioned, some other people at the credit union, Bob Gill and I worked on behalf of both parties really, the PRA and the credit union. And right now, the way it works is that if you have a direct online account and you'd like to pay your dues without having to put something in the mail, with your request to the credit union, they can add something to your online page that allows you to transfer the money, the payment, the dues payment, directly to the PRA. Click a link and it's sent. You can send it from your Visa account, from your savings, your money market, etc. It does work. I've used it. It has some weaknesses, which is why we don't use it widely, but it is there if you want to use it. We are exploring additional options, and Dan will speak about the website and the additional online payment options that we're looking at in a moment. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that we are also working toward a memorial, a Polaroid memorial that would be placed at 1265 Main Street. If you recall, some years back, Eric Thorgerson arranged for a plaque at the Osborne Street location for recognizing Dr. Land, and it is there. It's a very nice plaque. We'd like to do something similar that recognizes Polaroid's manufacturing capability as part of Waltham's manufacturing capability, historical capability, at the Main Street site. I've been working on that. As I said, we've made some progress. We know where we're going to put it. We know what it's going to look like. We have not made any progress toward composing what the plaque would say. And for that, I would like to ask anybody who's interested in helping to please come up and see me or see one of the board members that I mentioned, to raise a hand and be part of a project team on that. Dan, where are you?
Right here.
Dan is on the corner and would like to spend just a minute telling you about the website. New website.
Hi, everybody. So let's see, sometime later this fall, we're going to be introducing a new version of the website. It's going to be, you can reach it with polaroidretirees.org, so that's not going to change. There's a couple of reasons we're doing this. Number one is because technology, the website we have now is 30 years old, believe it or not. And the technology it's built on is just archaic. And there's a fear that at some point in time, we're not going to see the website able to be supported by technical people who host our website. And so it scares me that at some point in time the website could just go dark. So we're redesigning it under new technology, and it's got a facelift. All of the old features that were on the old website will be there, except a few that nobody's been using, so I just got rid of those. And we're going to add some new features. One of the features we're going to add is a list of obituaries sorted by name with a lookup function. Whereas I know if you look at the obituaries now, it's really kind of, it's by date of death, and you really can't navigate it through very well. But this list will have a lookup, so you can type in the person's name and it'll get you right down there. It's a big list. It's 2,400 people. So I know. Anyway.
And growing.
Yeah, and growing, yeah, right, exactly. So we've got a couple of other features coming along. We're going to do some electronic payment capabilities, which I don't think we're going to release in the first release because we need to make sure that all this works right. But we're going to allow you to pay your dues online. And will allow you to register for a luncheon online and pick your meals and add a friend if you want to do that sort of thing. And I'm also going to put a button up there for donations. So if anyone wants to contribute to the PRA, press that button and throw some money in. So this will all be by credit card and very convenient, hopefully. What else? Oh, we've got a few links we've added to get you out to the Polaroid groups in Facebook. That'll take you directly there. They're really interesting groups that you can sit in on and have Polaroid employees talking about what's going on with them and so on. And we've added a number of other videos through the website as well. So they should be entertaining as well. So that's about it for now, and we'll keep you posted, and hopefully we'll have this out before Christmas.
And each of you can play a role in this. When the website is out, even if it's in a beta version, testing version, when the website's available, you could look at it and critique it to suggest improvements or to suggest things that should be there that we haven't thought about putting there. And it's something that we can work on. And I'm not trying to overload Dan with more work, but if we've forgotten something that's important and useful, then we should work to install it.
Yeah, there'll be a place on the website where you can send us emails.
Great. In a minute, I'd like to ask Bill Plummer to say a few words. He has something interesting to introduce to you, but before I get there, Bill, give me a second. I'd like to just ask for your help. We need really two things. One is we need more members in the PRA. We joke about the obituaries. It's a sad thing, but it's true. It's part of life. And our numbers are dropping. But we also know that there are a lot of former Polaroid employees, our alumni, if you will, out there who aren't part of the PRA. They're local. They're not part of this group. If you have friends, colleagues, work friends from years past, if you know of folks, ask them to please join the PRA. The dues are extremely reasonable. What are the dues now? $20 a year? Or 150? What's that?
Or just a lifetime.
Or 150 lifetime. That means you don't have to worry about paying for it anymore. It's all done. And as much as I hate to say anything about the credit union, but if you're a fully paid up member, they will fund our springtime luncheon. And they've done it so many years. We're grateful for that. Which means for $20 you get a pretty good meal and you get to participate in the annual meeting. So I'd like to ask you all to search your minds, talk to your friends, look for folks who you know worked at Polaroid but aren't part of this group, and ask them if they'd please join. That's the first thing. The second thing is the board of directors, the names I mentioned, works hard to put these events together, get the newsletter out, take care of the website, and manage other activities. And we need people to help us. So if you're willing to help, please volunteer. There's going to come a time when there's not going to be people who are going to do this, and these won't happen. So if you enjoy these meetings we have, and if you enjoy the newsletter and enjoy the access to the website and the material there, then please consider adding helping hands to what we're doing. And if each of you could just solicit one person to join the PRA, if each of you could just solicit one person to join the board, maybe it's you, maybe it's a friend, it would be wonderful. It'd be very helpful. Bill?
Thank you, Don. I've been wearing hearing aids for about 30 years.
Bill, you want the microphone?
I've been wearing hearing aids for about 30 years, and some of you may also be wearing hearing aids. You know that they're not perfect, but there's a lot that they will do, a lot that they won't do. Back about May or June, my wife spotted something somewhere about a new product. Its name is transcribed glass. I have a pair on over my regular glasses. And what they do is they give you captions so you can see what people are saying. I'll pass them around, you can try them out, and you'll get to see what they say. You use them along with something like an iPhone. They're not cheap, but they're cheaper than a lot of hearing aids you can get. I ordered one back in June, received it a couple of months ago, and I've been using it off and on in some interesting ways. The guy who developed this is a 25-year-old guy from India who's a student off and on at Yale. And he's been doing this sort of as a sideline, bringing in various kinds of experts to do the work on an as-needed basis. And it's been going reasonably well. This is one of the first 500 he sold. He's arranged for another 500, what he calls the October batch, And you can actually reserve one for $50, and sooner or later it'll show up. But it's an interesting product. I find they're great for movies in theaters that don't have captions. So that's opened up a number of theaters I wouldn't otherwise have gone back to. But I'll pass these around. You can take a look and see what they look like. And can you read it okay?
Oh, yeah.
You
How
can,
much are they?
you can make some changes like the number of lines of text and how big they are and where they are, and how bright they are, stuff like that. And even how long it takes them to fade out.
Bill, make sure that you ask to get them back.
Yeah.
And if you don't, give somebody the power supply.
What's the name of the company or the email?
It's connected to the Apple my iPhone. I think you'll find they won't work very far away.
Question is, what's the name of the company?
The name of the company is Transcribe Glass. And if you go to transcribeglass.com, you can read all about it. But if you want to get one, do it through me, because I get a $20 rebate when somebody orders it. All right?
So let me understand, if we put these on the PRA website, will the PRA get $20?
Let's negotiate that later. But anyway, I just mentioned because they're kind of a neat thing.
Yeah,
I think that's,
you know, like when
Right.
you get the, on the TV, right, the closed captions, sometimes they read like crazy stuff. These seem to be like, they're right on, you know what I mean?
They're pretty good.
Yeah.
Now, you can use these offline or online. If it's online, they do a little better. And the other thing interesting is they will translate. There are about 50 languages that will turn into English when they're talking at you. I could have used one of these a few years ago when I was going to China a lot. It doesn't turn my voice into Chinese, but
The question was asked, how much?
the price changes. I'll give you the numbers I know. Back in June, I paid $389, and it's $20 a month for the software license to continue. The ones for October, he's asking $499.
I'll
So
tell him
$400
you know
to
a lot of
$500
people.
plus a $240 yearly subscription.
Yeah. So that's where it is. Anyway, you know, I get, like I said, I get $20 back if you actually sign up. But this is an interesting guy whose name I can't quite pronounce. It's Madhav something or other. But it's an interesting product, an interesting story.
Thanks very much, Bill. Very interesting.
Is it only Apple phone, or is it all phones?
I assume it'll work on other smartphones.
Because you said Apple, that's why I asked.
Yeah, I can find out.
I think lunch is ready, but before we start, a reminder that our spring annual meeting will be May 18th. Did I get that right, Paul?
Yes.
May 18th.
Monday, May 18th.
Monday, May 18th. Presumably at the same place it was this year and the year before. It's a good venue. And I don't think we've arranged the speaker yet. By the way, that's another thing that that the board could use your help with. If you know of someone who might be a really good speaker with a topic that would interest most of us and be willing to do it for a free lunch, please let us know. We could use that help. Okay. Is there anything anybody here would like to bring up, or can we break for lunch?
I'd just like to say, Ted McClellan passed away, didn't quite make it into this newsletter. Ted was a great guy that worked with many, many people. Goes back to the 60s, former selectman in Quincy. I had the honor of spending the last 5-10 years working with him in large format, which we're still keeping going, courtesy of John Reuter. So just a
Thank you.
shout out.
Thank you for reminding me. I got an email.
He didn't quite make it into this.
I received an email yesterday from our friend Howie Warzel asking for some information on
I talked to
that.
Howie last night. So
Okay.
Betty
Good.
sends her regards.
I think lunch is ready.
Good.
Oh, wait, there was,
Was there another question?
did you have that?
It's not a question, but I I'd like to see us come up with a welcome committee. If we're going to reach out, and I've tried to reach out to a couple of people, but they've never called me back, which is kind of depressing, and I think they live near one another in the North Shore someplace. And, but I also think that with the effort that is really important to get more people involved, and we know that there were a lot more people at the company than show up here. I think it'd be nice to have a little welcoming committee, and if somebody wants to give me the phone numbers, I'll call them and welcome them. Because we had a lot of people come in the last 2 newsletters, and I was starting to go through them and see if I could get it through information, but I'm sure that the phone numbers are someplace and it'd be a lot easier, and I'm happy to call them.
Joyce, thank you for your help. That's a great suggestion, and thank you for expressing your willingness to be part of it, to volunteer,
Thank
really.
you.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
So let's see if we can pick that idea up and make something of it. Any ideas that I should hear?
So do we want to, when the buffet is up, just go by
But
tables?
it looks like the buffet is there,
Right, but I'm
and
just saying, do we want to do like we did last time, a table at a time?
Karen is volunteering to organize that. Thank you, Karen. Lunch is served.
Okay, what we did last time is just have one.
Friends, we're trying to turn off the lights here to start the presentation. Before Peter gets going, Bo asked me to remind you to please leave your badges on the table so that we can reuse them next year. Turn it back in. Bo, where do you want them? On the dining room table?
Table on the left.
It's the plastic gizmo he wants to keep. You can keep your badge. We didn't get the light out yet. I think he's going to get all the lights out except for the one that's shining on the top right of the screen. We may have to suffer with that one. Peter, I'm going to turn the microphone over to you. And when we're done, we're done.
Not quite yet. Does this work? Okay. Oh, great. Hi, everybody. Yay. I'm glad we're starting a little early. I've spent most of the last week or so, and certainly a lot of last night, trying to make this talk short enough so that I won't get shot.
I don't think there are any weapons in here.
Well, you never know, do you?
We got strong people.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, this talk is full of pictures. That screen is not very large. And if any of you folks in the back of the room would care to take these 5 seats up front, it's great. I won't do anything bad to you, and you'll be able to see. So I think that's a great thing. So I'm going to start. It really is an honor for me to get to talk to this group of all groups about photography. This is a talk that I built last year to give to the LERA group, Learning and Retirement Association at the UMass Lowell. I go to lectures there, and I thought, well, I could do this because I have a lot of the material in place. So last year, I gave this talk, and it took me 4 hours. So today we're going to need to go real fast. And I've already taken a lot of stuff out of it. I've taken everything that's technical out of it, not that there was that much of that. So it's mostly pictures that we're going to see, and we're going to talk about the progression of creative photography from the beginning of it, which is really in like 1839 till, well, more or less now. So we'll see a lot of pictures. Many will be familiar, some may be new to you. And I think most of the pictures we'll see today are at least memorable, and you'll recognize them if you see them again. And of course, just for Polaroid consumption, Edwin Land was a great proponent of creative photography.
We all know this. He believed that the camera should be a tool that can be used by anybody for visual self-expression. And that was kind of the idea behind the SX70 and his vision. And also, as we all know, Land and Polaroid supported a lot of distinguished artistic photographers. And so their work was collected in the Polaroid collection, which was a fabulous construction. I'm hoping someday we'll have somebody come in and actually talk about the Polaroid collection to this group, because I think it's an interesting story. So anyway, this title slide shows a camera obscura way before photography. Back then, people would trace by hand the image that a lens makes on a piece of paper or a ground glass. I wouldn't call that photography because it's not automatic recording of an image. But that's what they had before all that was worked out. Well, before I really start, I've got just a tiny bit of information about me. I know you're fascinated. I worked in optical engineering for Bill Plemmer on the optics of Polaroid products for about 20 years. I'm delighted that Dr. Plemmer is sitting here in front of me, and it's great to see you, Bill. And so before my time, Bill and James Baker were the inventors of the SX70 camera's optics, the revolutionary optics of that camera. It was a great privilege for me to work in optical engineering with those two and with all the other folks, great people that they hired to do Polaroid's work. And that's that. I got into optics because of my teenage passion for photography. For me, photography came first. And then I studied optics in college and ultimately landed in Polaroid. And so let's see, I have one career highlight. Does anybody know what that is?
I do.
Yay! So one person has seen this before.
I designed it.
So did I.
When the optics got too confusing, you came in and bailed me out.
Get out. Very simple camera. Anyway, this is the Macro 5 SLR, and it was an unusual Polaroid medical close-up camera. It had a cameo appearance on ER in 1999, and that's a screenshot from ER. That's, I'll say, a highlight, not the highlight of my Polaroid career. And so, great. I'm glad some people recognize it. Anyway, moving on, back. The word camera, actually, we all know comes from Latin or Greek or something for a room, a chamber. It's basically a box with a lens or a hole on one end, and the light goes through that hole or the lens and gets projected onto the opposite wall where there might be a piece of film or something else that will record the image. So there's a great camera project you can do. You can turn a room into a giant camera obscura like that, only way bigger. You can cover up all the windows, cut a 1-inch or so hole in one window, and then look in the opposite wall, and you'll see a live color, upside down image of the outside world. Kids love it. It's a great demo for kids. It's not a very bright thing to see. You have to let your eyes adjust, but you'll see this image, and it's kind of magical. Now, there is a photographer named Abelardo Morel. He's Boston-based. He was born in '48. He's still living, I think, as of recently. And he loves to play with alternate camera optics. So he did that demo, built the room, and then he photographed inside the room, basically having a camera within a camera. So we see here the walls and furniture in a room and the upside down image of the outside world. So if I flip this top to bottom, you see a right side image of the outside world, and it might be a familiar scene. So yeah, that's Boston, that's the old Central Artery. You can see the Custom House Tower, and the furniture doesn't bother you so much. If you go back, it's hard to see the wall without looking at the furniture. Anyway, I don't think we see traffic on the expressway, mostly because he needed a long exposure time, because it's a pretty dim image. Anyway, back to the beginnings of photography. Here's a beautiful picture. As early as I wasn't supposed to show this yet. As early as 1802, Thomas Wedgwood, who's related to the Potters, was recording images with silver nitrate on leather, but they weren't permanent, so that doesn't count as photography. In 1827, Joseph Nicephore Niepce recorded a positive image using a bitumen of Judea, which is a naturally occurring asphalt that's coated on pewter. Light exposure makes the material harden, and then the unexposed material can be dissolved away with a solvent, and you have a positive image. Now, there it is. Pretty nice, huh? 8 hours of exposure is what you get to get this picture. And when you look it up in books, you find that it really looks like that. They tend to adjust it, to optimize it, and you can tell that it's actually a permanent photograph of a building. And so that's considered really the first actual photograph. But 1839 was the big year, and don't read this. I'm not intending for you guys to read these things. In 1839, three things happened. Silver halide coating started being used by Daguerre and Niepce. That's one. William Herschel's discovery of sodium thiosulfate to fix the images was essential. That worked by dissolving away the unexposed silver salts. And by the way, Herschel coined the term photography, and we'll hear more. We'll see him later. And Henry Fox Talbot managed to make a paper negative that could be reproduced as a positive. So that's very much like the modern black and white photography process. And Daguerre, with Niepce, invented the daguerreotype, which produced a delicate positive image seen in reflection. It's very difficult to reproduce because it's not transparent at all, but it became immediately popular because the images are just beautiful. It took a daylight exposure of maybe 5 to 40 minutes at first. And this picture of Paris, we'll see a lot of Paris today, is the only picture, it's legendary because the only picture of Daguerre's output that actually has a live person in it, and you can see them on the corner. There are two people, a person getting his shoes shined and the person doing the work, and they made it into the picture because they didn't move. So there you have it, the first recording of a human in a photograph, as far as I know. So daguerreotypes became daguerreotypes of famous places around the world were made in the 1840s. These things go fast. This was, remember, 1839 was the beginning. And so this is a picture of Niagara Falls in 1853, fairly large for a daguerreotype, 8.5 by 6.5 inches. This one happens to be on display at the Addison Gallery in Andover right now. There's a photographic exhibit. They have a lot of good photography exhibits up in Andover. It's free. It's at the Phillips Academy. It's really worth the trip. And then here we are in 1843, and Fox Talbot made this picture, which is already artistic. I mean, it's arranged to be pleasing. And this is one of the results of his paper negative contact printed to make a paper print. But the killer app for photography was portraiture, because everybody wanted a picture of their family. The caption of this is, "Now say cheese for 3 minutes." This cartoon showed up just this summer. It's amazing. It's brand new. so there they have it, and they're the unsmiling people in front of the portrait camera. And here's an actual daguerreotype of a photographer in his studio making a portrait of a person who's doing his darndest to hold still. So already by 1843, there were different formulas for the films. The exposures got a lot shorter, under a minute at this point, and we're off and running. And there's a typical portrait of the time of three lovely young women. And every family would want to be able to do this. This is a carte de visite. It was quite a fad at the time. This one's from, can't even read it, 1863. And people would have these portraits of themselves taken using a special camera that could they'd shift the film and take another picture. And they'd make prints, cut them up, and you'd bring them to when you visited important people, and you'd hand them out like business cards. So, a social version of the business card. And the Civil War happened, and it was very much documented. It's probably maybe the first important war that was documented in photography. There were many photographers working for a guy named Matthew Brady. The best known of those people was Alexander Gardner, who actually left Brady in 1863 and did his own thing. And these powerful images of war became the beginning of photojournalism. This particular image is a little controversial because people believe that it was kind of staged, but it doesn't matter. Never mind. Photo studios were popping up near Civil War battle sites, so the soldiers could send their pictures back to their families, which is interesting. I learned that just last year. I didn't realize that. Moving on. I got to go fast. This, I'm sure you'll agree, is a moving and powerful argument for the abolition of slavery. This is a Matthew Brady picture. And here, Lincoln was one of the most photographed people of the time. And this is a good example. You can see how shallow the depth of field is in this picture. By that I mean Lincoln's eyes are in focus, they're sharp, but his ears and his shoulders are not. It's a consequence of keeping the exposure time as short as possible by having a lens that's as big as possible. By the way, in the 1860s, the collodion wet plate process replaced daguerreotypes to a large degree, and it produced permanent glass negatives and reduced daylight exposure time just to seconds. So it was much more reasonable for portraiture. If you were doing this, you needed to coat your own plates in darkness and expose them in the camera while they were still wet, which is a significant problem. But photographers built portable darkrooms for the purpose if they weren't in the studio, and somehow they got by. Meanwhile, in France, there was a big project to photograph many famous people. And so this Gaspard Félix Tour-Lachon, who lived from 1820 to 1910, but he was known as Nadar, was a French photographer, caricaturist, journalist, novelist, and balloonist. People did everything back then. And in 1853, he became the first person to take aerial photographs from balloons. But anyway, he made this photograph and a whole lot of other portraits of important people. Here's one more. This is Gioacchino Rossini, the prosperous composer of operas. He composed William Tell. Now we know the overture, everybody knows the overture, and the Barber of Seville. So this French periodical was collecting portraits of famous people, literary and political and artistic. And Karjat, the photographer of Rossini here, and Nadar were just two of the photographers. So, new topic, documenting the American West. Imagine this wet plate process when you're in a wagon dragging across the western part of America. Photography was a really important tool for documenting the American West. Intrepid people like William Henry Jackson, that's this one, who photographed the Grand Canyon in the 1870s, would travel long distances with equipment and chemicals in wagons. They needed to coat their negatives on site, expose them, and develop them in very difficult circumstances. Timothy O'Sullivan was another. This is the Canyon de Chelly in 1873. It's a gorgeous photograph. I'll show you later Ansel Adams' duplicate of that photograph. They both look equally gorgeous. And Edward Curtis, also another picture of the Canyon de Chelly, and a Navajo medicine man. He continued to work in the West and got up to Alaska. So these guys are just trying to document this new territory. Meanwhile, people back in the cities or whatever were inventing sort of artistic schools, and photography kind of fell into this trap of trying to imitate 19th century art in a movement called pictorialism. One example of this, maybe not strictly 19th century, but was Oscar Rejlander, who was Swedish and English, and he became an expert in photomontage. He would build up a print from a whole bunch of different negatives using just magical technique, and he came up with this. His famous thing was the 2 ways of life in 1857. It's very difficult to do that well. I have a quote here from Beaumont Newhall's The History of Photography. He conceived a vast stage on which an allegory was acted out by 25 models representing a venerable sage introducing 2 young men into life. The one, calm and placid, turns toward virtue. The other rushes madly towards sin. The final print here, that quote's over, was 31 by 16 inches, and was purchased by, of all people, Queen Victoria, who herself was an amateur photographer. And here's another composite picture, another photo montage by Henry Peach Robinson called Fading Away in 1858. A girl clearly dying with her family around her. The subject was shocking at the time, says Newhall, because it was a photograph, and it carried with that the implications of reality that a painting of the same scene wouldn't have. People see a photograph and they think, wow, this must be the real thing. And so it sounds like a bit of a premonition about our AI discussions that we have these days. And we'll see, much later, we'll see one more example of a photo montage, but this time from the 20th century. Charles Ludwig Dodgson was Lewis Carroll, the author of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. This is a photograph he made of the Alice that he dedicated, that he wrote the book for. She's 7 years old here in 1859, and Carroll was a really good example of an enthusiastic Victorian photographer. Julia Margaret Cameron, 1815 to 1879, was a great photographer. I'll show you a number of her pictures. She was an upper-class English lady born in Calcutta who lived in all over the British colonial world. And then she met John Herschel, that John Herschel in South Africa, the same one who discovered the fixing solution. And then eventually she moved with her family. She was raising 11 children, not all her own. They moved to England in 1845, and she took up photography at the age of 48. And she produced over 900 photographs in 12 years, and they're gorgeous. Here's one, The Kiss of Peace. She used the wet plate process, so she made her own plates and did all her own darkroom work. Her work was a mixture of portraits and tableau, with these stage scenes, of which this is an example. This is a typically romantic group portrait. The soft focus is intentional. It's part of that pictorialist aesthetic to try and look as much like a painting as they could. Here's the next one. Isn't that irresistible, this angel here? It's just great. 1860s. And she knew and photographed a lot of famous people. This is Herschel, same old Herschel, astronomer, mathematician, chemist, inventor, God knows what else he did. This is Charles Darwin, not soft focus. This is a very sharply focused image. She would mess with her lens to get the soft focus. And then here's good old Alice Liddell again at age 20. Here's a painting by John Singer Sargent in 1885, just to be a reference point towards art at that period of time. And here is a typical pictorialist photograph. It was a movement in photography to achieve acceptance as art with a capital A. Soft focus, classical themes, and artistic manipulation were common. Another one. And I have two images by by an American woman who was excellent, Gertrude Kessebier. Blessed art thou among women. And here's a portrait of Alfred Stieglitz. We'll learn about him in a few minutes. But notice the manipulated background of this thing. It's very much like what people were doing with Polaroid integral photographs much, much later. So I'm tired of talking about the is it art debate. In this talk, I've sprinkled a few photographs by a French photographer named Robert Doisneau. I didn't know his work very well, but I've got a few of his pictures that are basically about photography. So here's the first one. And this is, by the way, our second photograph of Paris, introducing the section called Photography for Everyone. George Eastman and Kodak created a product that everyone could use. 1, buy the camera with film installed. 2, take 100 pictures. 3, mail the camera to Rochester. 4, Kodak would return your prints with a reloaded camera. For $25 in 1888, which turns out to be, if I did the math right, about $8 a picture today. And didn't we do that not that long ago, like in the 1990s with these so-called disposable cameras? I think so. Early Kodaks gave you round pictures. The one on the top right there is George himself on a ship using his camera in 1890. And that brings me, Photography for Everyone brings me to Jacques-Henri Lartigue, who was born in 1894 and lived a long life, died in 86. But he's famous now for these youthful photographs that he made. And I'll read you a quote about that. According to the gallery that sells his pictures, and it's a really good quote here, he was a French photographer and painter, noted for the spontaneous, joyful photographs he took, beginning in his boyhood and continuing throughout his life. Lartigue's boyhood photographs were almost always candid images taken of his family and friends. He was only 11 when he captured his cousin flying down the staircase there. Amazing. Here's I think it's his brother Maurice hanging on to a glider in 1909 when Henri was 15. And weren't they having fun? Gosh. So Lartigue was discovered in the early 1960s, and his work was shown at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City in 1963. So here's Maurice again, having fun, when Henri was 17. It's amazing. And a street scene. Jacques-Henri is 17 here. And here is his most famous picture is this one. The distortion that you see gives us the impression of a fast-moving race car. I think it's accidental. I don't think he knew that this was going to happen. His camera had a focal plane shutter, which has a slit just next to the film. So that slit flies across the film from top to bottom. Each part of the scene experiences a short exposure time, but the bottom of the scene is exposed a lot earlier than the top of the scene. So Lartigue is panning to try and keep up with the car, but he's not doing it fast enough. So the car looks like it's leaning forward, and the background looks like it's leaning backward. Anyway, the result is really cool, no matter whether he intended it or not. Speaking of motion, a character named Edward Muybridge was English and moved to the U.S., eventually to San Francisco. He was born in 1830, And he had a complicated life. He had a serious personality-altering head injury. And then he murdered his wife's lover and got away with it. But he's best known for his locomotion studies, of which this is one. He made multiple photos of people and animals to document how they move. This is the most famous one, from 1878, in which he demonstrated that all four of a galloping horse's legs leave the ground when they are gathered under the animal. And if you can see in the top two center images that sure enough there isn't a hoof on the ground. And I'm sure a lot of barbets were won thanks to that. Something you couldn't see by eye. Then after thinking about Lartigue and Muybridge, this is I can't resist thinking about photo finish cameras. This is gosh, I hate to spend the time on it, but it's really interesting because this is an image which is, up and down is up and down, but left and right is time. Every place on this image going from left to right is at the finish line of the race. So you can see which horse got there first by seeing where it is in time. And the only reason I'm showing you this picture, because I want to show you this one. If you had your money on the gull to place, you did pretty well. Back to seriousness. Okay, Jacob Riis, born 1849 to 1914, was a Danish-American social reformer, journalist, and social documentary photographer. And where's my... I have to read this stuff or I'm going to lose all sorts of time, which I've probably lost already. He exposed the terrible conditions of immigrants living in New York City in the late 19th century. And here's one example. Baxter Street is called. This is lodgers in a crowded Bayard Street tenement in 1889, which I'm sure he exposed with one of those magnesium flashes, that you see every now and then in old movies. And then there's Bandit's Roost, 59.5 Mulberry Street, which apparently is a very scary place to be. But he toughed it out and got his picture. And then Louis W. Hine is in a similar vein, not identical. Another social reformer and photographer. He taught the great photographer Paul Strand, whose work we'll see later. This picture is immigrants arriving at Ellis Island. I don't have a date for it. And he was a big proponent of child labor laws, so he traveled all over the country looking at factories where children were working. And he found this one, in 1908. And now we get to Eugene Aché. Who's heard of Aché? Anybody? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, not that many people. Where am I? Okay, Aché. He's one of the earliest of my photographic heroes. He was not part of an artistic movement. He wasn't trying to duplicate painting or anything like that. His personal mission was to document old France. Between the 1890s through the 1920s almost, he was going all over the place photographing old culture that he was worried was going to be lost. And along the way, he developed his own very expressive personal photographic style. As a young man, let's see, I can show you his picture. As a young man, he went to sea for a while. He studied acting. He worked as an actor for 6 to 10 years, painted briefly, and then he finally took up photography in his early 30s. And he was selling photographs. There he is in his 30s, and there he is at 1927, the year that he died. He sold photographs to artists at first. And in 1897, he decided to specialize in photographs of Paris. So we have a few that are relatively early outside of Paris. And a plowed field, which reminds me of another photograph we'll see later on. A couple of chairs being overrun by vines. This is gorgeous. Most people, certainly at the time, wouldn't think to make this photograph, but he did. And a wife of Verrières, which is a location, farm wife. And he made these marvelous street scenes of villages in France around, outside of Paris. And yeah, so another photographer named Bernice Abbott, who we'll meet, wrote about him. She says, about the same period as the pictorialists, another man was working quietly, unknown, unappreciated, but with a profound love of life. With concentrated energy and mature discernment, this man came to photography in the second half of his life. His name was Eugene Auger. He gave the world hundreds of great photographs. He was very busy and excited in discovering photography and what it meant. He didn't talk much. His time was spent penetrating and recording his immediate and wonderful world. His work is purely and entirely photographic. It is still comparatively little known today. This was in 1951. She wrote this. That's not the case anymore. So coming into Paris, here's the Luxembourg Garden. And Naomi Rosenblum in the World History of Photography says, using a simple 18 by 24 centimeter camera, that's 7-inch by 9.5-inch glass plates mounted on a tripod, this former actor began to document the city and its environs. And he would get up first thing in the morning, while the light was soft, and trek all over the city and with his tripod and his camera and his black cloth and all of his plates. These beautifully composed images resonate with an intense, though not easily defined, passion. Rich in detail, but not fussy, affecting, but not sentimental, this great body of work represents Auger's yearning to possess all of old Paris, and in so doing to embrace the authentic culture of France that modern technology was destroying. Love the angels looking down on the staircase. In this one, not my favorite picture, but you can see his camera underneath the black cloth in this room, reflected in that. Why is there a mirror in the fireplace? I don't know. If you find yourself, this is the Seine River, looking up towards Notre Dame is sort of blown out, but it's on the right. And this is a detail of the door of Notre Dame Cathedral. And yes, now's the time when I say, if you find yourself in Paris, it's fun to try to find the locations that Auger photographed. That door knocker is still there. Damn, in 2015. Amazing. Although he did a better job than I did of photographing that thing. Montmartre. I don't think you can find this scene very well, although the giant church in the background is, of course, still there. He thought to photograph Notre Dame through the tree branches in 1925. This is pretty late. And on the Ile Saint-Louis, he made this beautiful picture on sort of a foggy morning. Now, the old regime. This is the castles and parks of the French monarchy, which were still there in 1901. Suddenly his compositions are different. They're more striking, they're more contrasty, like this, big masses of trees and curves, and another garden at Saint-Cloud. This section is called, these titles come from a set of books with his stuff, and this is called Modern Times. Well, it's not modern, of course, it's his time. And he was interested in different professions. So here's an organ grinder, famous picture from 98? Here's a lampshade salesperson. Here's a prostitute. He actually had a commission to photograph prostitutes. And here's a very popular eating and drinking place in Montparnasse, which of course wasn't open yet when he was out early in the morning, but it's a beautiful picture. For 3 housewives. And he took pictures of shop windows with the, what do you call them, the models inside them. Sorry? Help me. Yeah, okay. Anyway, he took pictures of these, and they became very appealing to surrealistic artists. They love the combination of having the reflection of the outside and these mysterious, lifelike figures inside. And there he is, photographed by Berenice Abbott in the last year of his life. So, another photographer, August Zonder, was German, portraits and documentary material. His big life project was to photograph the people of the 20th century, attempting to make portraits of various kinds of professions. So it's sort of like Ajay was doing at the end. So there's a bricklayer, there's a pastry cook, he's great, and these 3 young farmers. Must be Sunday morning or something. I don't know. They're awful well dressed to be farmers, but they're wonderful pictures. All right, I left this technical thing in. I thought I'd talk a little bit about handheld cameras, because these in the day, these were cameras built by the Graflex Corporation, which belonged to Kodak actually for a period of time. The one on top is a Graflex. And it's a single lens reflex. It's got a big mirror in the middle of it. And the one on the bottom is your classic speed graphic press camera that you see in movies all the time with a giant flash. They're both sort of medium to large format negatives up to 4x5. You'll find a lot of the folks I'm going to talk about now use them, especially the Graflex and variants of it. So back to the art world. Stieglitz is, well, I'll tell you who Stieglitz is. Just a sec. Alfred Stieglitz, born in 1864, died in 1946. One of the first of my favorite photographers. He was also a great champion of modern art, very famous for this, introducing the European contemporary masters to America in the early 20th century. He was born in New Jersey, but he went to Germany to study engineering. He hated that, but he started taking pictures in Germany. And in the 1920s, he married Georgia O'Keeffe, the great young American painter. She's a good deal younger than he. And Stieglitz, was acknowledged to be a master of photography. Many serious workers would come to him in New York, hoping for his guidance and approval. Edward Steichen, Paul Strand, Edward Weston, Ansel Adams, they all came and worshipped at his feet. He published publications to promote photography as a fine art. Those were his 2 things. Get the modern arts of Europe to be adopted and adapted and accepted in the United States, and also to promote photography as an accepted art form. And then here's a couple of pictures of his galleries. This is an exhibit of photographs that he mounted in 1906. Not his pictures, Gertrude Kesebier, we mentioned him before, and Clarence White. And this is a photograph of exhibit of Brancusi sculptures in 1914. So he always had something going on. He introduced Rodin and Matisse in 1908, Cézanne in 1910, Picasso in 1911, and a long list of American painters in this gallery and 2 others. And he presided over the evolution of photography from the romantic pictorialism to what he called straight photography. He recognized that, here's another quote from a book, Lives of the Great Photographers. As a leader of the pictorialist movement, Alfred Stieglitz searched for beauty through the craftsman-like creation of photographs, held pioneering exhibitions of his contemporaries, published their works and sought to have the still nascent art form taken as seriously as painting. But as modernism seeped into the cultural ferment in the early 20th century, he became mesmerized by the growing cacophony of society, rising skyscrapers, soaring airplanes, and strove to create what he termed straight photography, offering truthful takes on the real world. Here's one example. This is an early one, the terminal car of steaming horses. He kind of pioneers taking photographs of in bad weather, you know. And I love this picture of the hand of man in 1902 turning those railroad tracks into a gorgeous geometrical pattern. This photograph, the steerage in 1907, was a revolutionary thing. Now, let's see, I have things to read about that. Stieglitz tells the story of this image. He was on this steamer heading for Paris when he saw this scene. Of course, steerage is the cheap seats down below, and the first-class passengers are on the upper deck. A round straw hat, the funnel leaning left, the stairway leaning right, the white drawbridge, its railings made of chain, white suspenders crossed on the back of a man below, circular iron machinery, a mast that cut into the sky, completing a triangle. He saw this, recognized it as a fabulous composition, and he ran to get his camera because he didn't have him with him. He had only one plate when he got back. Nothing had changed. He felt that this was the most important picture he would ever make. If I had captured what I wanted, the photograph would go far beyond any of my previous prints. It would be a picture based on related shapes and deepest human feeling, a step in my own evolution, a spontaneous discovery. Never mind. He goes on and compares the feeling to what he's wondering what Rembrandt would feel like if he encountered this. He goes a little overboard. From Lives of the Great Photographers, the steerage represented a radical way of thinking about photography, not just as a momentary mimic of painting, but a wholly formed and unique type of art. This was one of the first modernist pictures, helping photography to be seen on a par with these other innovative forms of art. None other than the painter Pablo Picasso admired the steerage's cubistic sense and wrote that both he and Stieglitz were, quote, working in the same spirit. Stieglitz made wonderful portraits of Georgia O'Keeffe. And this is one of her paintings, Lily with Red, in 1928. And he made what I always loved, were these wonderful photographs of New York skylines with skyscrapers being built. There's a second one. And here they had a place to go in Lake George, up in the country, upstate New York, and Georgia would paint the hills and the sky, and Alfred would photograph the sky. And he called these pictures, this series, the Equivalents. This one, Equivalent Music Number 1, Lake George, 1922. And another equivalent. And another equivalent. So these are presumably images that are equivalent to his emotional responses to what he was seeing. Meanwhile, across the pond, mostly in France, there were experiments going on, and surrealists were getting into photography. And Man Ray, who was originally named Emanuel Radnitsky, for example, he was an American visual artist who was mostly working in Paris. He contributed to the Dada and Surrealist movements. He's a painter and commercial photographer, but he's best known for his pioneering photography. This is a photogram where you lay objects on photographic paper, no camera required. Man Ray called these rayograms. This is an example of solarization that he was doing in 1929, where some of the tonal ranges get inverted, and so it gives you a very strange effect of both positive and negative images and making up the same image. André Kertész was a Hungarian-born photographer, born in 1894, and his work was experimental and surrealist. I love this fork and the shadows and everything. Kertész, again, he would find bizarre distortions and reflections from curved mirrors. And he liked to look at the world from unusual directions. Here's a simple, straight photograph, which is really very disorienting if until you think about where he is. Now we'll get to talk about Berenice Abbott. She was born in 1898 and lived a long life until 1991. She was a young American art student in Paris in the mid-20s. She became an accomplished photographer working with Man Ray. She met and photographed Ace in 1927, as we said before, just months before he died. We heard her comments about Ace a little while ago. Shortly after his death, she purchased his remaining work, 1,500 glass negatives, 8,000 original prints, and she shipped the collection to America when she returned in 1929, and Abbott continued to promote Ace. Most of the collection landed eventually in the Museum of Modern Art in the 1950s, and from the biography of Berenice Abbott by Julia von Haften, when she returned in 1929, her first goal in the U.S. had been to promote Ace. She visited Alfred Stieglitz, expecting the old Stieglitz to receive her with open arms as Man Ray's young friend, an expatriate bringing home a treasure. Stieglitz viewed Ace's prints indifferently, and then offered Berenice a glimpse of his own equivalent series. She was appalled by these, quote, mystical hocus-pocusy cloud images and felt he didn't deserve Ace. Her enmity toward the eminence grise of American photography would grow. Finally, she dismissed Stieglitz, imagine, as a pompous egotist and hairy-eared cult leader, that's what that was, who took about 5 good pictures in his whole life. Stieglitz later said he regretted not knowing about Ace when he was publishing camera work in the early 20th century. I don't know if he ever learned how Berenice felt about him. All that's fine, and it's a great story, but Abbott was not a minor league photographer herself. You can see this very unusual vertical composition of Exchange Place down in the financial district in 1933. But when she was still in Paris, she made a lot of wonderful portraits of her artistic and literary friends. This is James Joyce in 1928. And when she got back to New York, she documented her city, kind of as Ace did, but in her own way. And then she later devoted herself to illustrations of scientific principles. She was working at MIT doing illustrations for technical books. And they're marvelous. Look at this. Anyway, I love the prism. So there she is in 1985. Don't mess with her. So Stieglitz's influence was everywhere. This is Paul Strand, whose early work especially was strongly influenced by Stieglitz. I won't go into his biography. In the beginning, he was doing these sort of almost abstract versions of scenery and furniture and things like that. So this seems to me to be kind of a cubist kind of thing that he's doing. This is an abstraction on a porch with, anyway, it's cool. It's great. But and then he was also doing photographs on the street of people. This one's famous, The Blind Woman in 1916. And he did a series of pictures with a secret camera on the subway. He's taking pictures of people on the subway. This, in 1922, is a beautiful portrait of his first wife, painter Rebecca Salisbury. As he matured, it seems to me, this is me saying this, his work became less abstract, more photographic. He traveled extensively. Here he's in New Mexico. Here's this family portrait in Italy is fabulous. And then he finally, he lived in Orgeval, France, for the last 27 years of his life, making beautiful pictures of his own garden as he got older. And that's it for him. And now, on to what I call the West Coast School, Edward Weston, I think it's IN. Anyway, Imogen Cunningham, Ansel Adams, and others. So we'll talk about Edward Weston. I guess it's Owen. He was born in 1886 in Illinois. He moved to Southern California in 1906, married in 1909, had 4 sons, at least 2 of whom became really, really good photographers on their own. He started a portrait studio, and in 1922, he photographed steel mills in the Midwest, like so, and went into New York to visit Stieglitz. Of course, you had to see Stieglitz and Strand. And then in 1923, he ran off to Mexico with Tina Modotti, an actress photographer. All right. Jeez, come on. And here's a landscape in Mexico of that period. Here's a woman named Guadalupe Marin de Rivera, pardon me for mispronouncing. She was a Mexican model and novelist. She was married to the muralist Diego Rivera. And Weston left notes in his early career called the Daybooks. Quote, "I am finishing the portrait of Lupe. It is a heroic head, the best I've done in Mexico. With the Graflex in direct sunlight, I caught her, mouth open, talking, and what could be more characteristic of Lupe? Singing or talking, I must always remember her." This is Manuel Hernandez Galvan shooting, 1924. He was a Mexican senator and general. Quote again, "I wanted to catch Galvan's expression while shooting. We stopped by an old wall. The trigger of his Colt fell, and I released my shutter. 30 paces away, a peso dropped to the ground. Clouds have been tempting me again." The same day, he's distracted from the clouds. These are famous pictures. Some might say that the shell and the vegetable pictures are sexier than the nudes. That's debatable. Look at that. In 1929, he moved to Carmel, California, where he was close to Ansel Adams and Cunningham and a bunch of people. And so he was in a real photographic community there. Here's another vegetable. Gorgeous. And he took this in 1937, and in 1937 he was the first photographer to receive a Guggenheim Fellowship, which allowed him to travel around to photograph the western United States. He could be whimsical as well. This is just a rock, just any old rock. This is a cypress trunk at Point Lobos in California. Point Lobos, I will mention, is a state reservation on the California coast just south of Carmel. Cypresses, kelp, rocks, surf, sea lions. Weston returned here again and again, particularly late in his career. I have a book called My Camera on Point Lobos. This. Take a look if you're interested. It's gorgeous. And Point Lobos is amazing. It's absolutely worth a visit. It's just a spectacular place on the California coast. That book, My Camera on Point Lobos, was published in 1950. The reproductions are excellent. Weston supervised them. It's the only thing like it that I have. I bought this thing used, and I'm delighted to own it. I don't know how many were actually made. Another gorgeous nude. He says, "Whenever I can feel a Bach fugue in my work, I know I've arrived." Which, boy. Sand dunes on Lake Tenaya, I think. And that's I think it, oh, never mind. I'll get there. Hill and telegraph poles. All this is California. Melting ice, kind of an abstract of melting ice in 1938, so it's getting later. And China Cove is at Point Lobos, and here in 1940. So we're getting towards his really mature work. North Wall, Point Lobos, 1946. These things are just amazing. And Point Lobos again. Sorry. According to Minor White, who was a photographer and guru at MIT at the end of his life, actually, at the end of his career, I should say. I don't have time to talk about Minor White at all, really. He says, "Rarely are we shown the maturest work of men who have lived richly and whose spirit has grown all their lives. The last photographs Edward Weston made at Point Lobos may parallel in content the last quartets of Beethoven." It's Beethoven or Bach, it doesn't matter, it's all fine. And he took his last photographs in 1948 because he was suffering from Parkinson's disease, and he died in 1958, 10 years later. And Imogen Cunningham, I've mentioned her name a couple of times. I'm going to zip right through her. Wonderful photographer of botanicals, nudes, industrial landscapes. And Frida Kahlo in 1932 had a fabulous calla lily in 1930. And finally, eventually, we get to Ansel Adams, who was born in 1902, died in 1984. Everybody's heard of him, right? Right. Of course. And there he is, photographed by Arnold Newman. We'll see his work later, too, outside of his studio in 1976. So, Ansel Adams, get this out of the way. He was born in San Francisco, studied classical piano from age 12. He planned to become a concert pianist, but he gave that up for photography. Got his first camera at age 14 on a trip to Yosemite, and he adopted his sharp focus style, precision style, around 1925 at age 23. He met and was strongly influenced by Paul Strand. He was a real outdoorsman, everybody knows. He would hike and camp in rugged wilderness, hauling camera, tripod, and film. And he won 3 Guggenheim Fellowships. And in 1949, he developed the zone system with Fred Archer, which is a technical method of pre-visualizing a photograph. He was a huge proponent of pre-visualization. You can't take a photograph, he says, without having a specific idea of what you want that print to look like. And so he would adjust how he worked while thinking of the final product. He did commercial work, and of course he consulted for some company in Cambridge. And he helped found a lot of important things. He helped found the photography department at the Museum of Modern Art, helped found Aperture magazine in 1952, which is still going as the premier source of what's happening in the fine art photography world. And also he had a lot to do with the Center of Creative Photography at the University of Arizona. He did many workshops, he taught people, very generous, great guy. I was going to go into the details of the zone system, but forget it. This early picture, 1927, monolith, the face of Half Dome in Yosemite, is tremendously famous. It's very dramatic, but is it realistic?
Yes.
I don't think so. You think so, Bob?
Yeah.
I say not really, but that's Adam's intention. The extremely dark sky is achieved with a deep red filter blocking all the blue and the blue light. And it was his thing to do whatever technical adjustments he needed to do with filters, exposure, contrast, development of the negative, development of the print. Those were all part of his creative process. And they were all under control by this pre-visualization zone system business. Adams, the musician, considered the negative to be like the composer's score and the print to be the performance. And his prints were, and still are, incomparable. I can't think of anybody who's his equal as a photographic printer. This is an interesting picture. Orville Cox and guess who? Georgia O'Keeffe. In guess where? Canyon de Chelly again in 1937. It's so interesting. It's charming. It's interesting partly because it's an Ansel Adams photograph using a 35 millimeter camera, the only one you'll see in this crowd. And look at the dramatic Adams sky, how they do that. And it's nice to see another picture of Georgia O'Keeffe. Here, Moonrise, Hernandez, New Mexico, one of his most popular works. The story is that Adams was driving along and he saw this scene, the church and cemetery at dusk, and he pulled to the side of the road. He was frantic to get the photo in the fading light, and he scrambled to set up his camera and tripod. He couldn't find his exposure meter, but he could calculate the exposure because he knew the luminance of the moon, and he exposed to place it in zone 7 in the zone system. He got only one chance because the light changed before he could take another picture. The negative was difficult to print, but Adams himself made over 1,300 prints of it during his career. And in 1948, Adams' print from the original negative sold in 2023 for $921,000. Remarkable. And so from here, we'll just fly through a short selection of Adams' work because he's so famous everybody knows about him. Look at that, Canyon de Chelly, just like the one we saw 100 years earlier. Well, not quite 100 years. The Tetons and the Snake River, gorgeous. The tonalities are astonishing. Evening, McDonald Lake, 1942. Aspens near Santa Fe, New Mexico, 1958. Cypress, Fog, Pebble Beach, California, 1967. And finally, Mission San Javier del Bac in 1968. Gorgeous. Just everything is glowing. You know, how does he do that? And now we get to Elliot Porter and color. Imagine color. There was a slide about color a moment ago, which I took out. It's really interesting that the two guys who did the development for Kodachrome, which was really the first successful color film, were both musicians. They were both classical musicians, Godofsky and Manis, and they were hired. They had some success on their own, and they were hired by Kodak. They brought them up to Rochester to finish the job, and Kodachrome resulted. Anyway, Elliot Porter, 1901 to 1990, was the best known for his brilliant color photos of nature. He, like Adams, was a photographer/environmentalist. He was introduced to Stieglitz by his painter-critic older brother in 1930, where he was just showing black and white work then, and Stieglitz exhibited his work. In 1961, at Ansel Adams' house for a Sierra Club meeting regarding the publication of Porter's book called In Wildness is the Preservation of the World, Porter writes, "I had brought a group of color photographs with me. When I unpacked them, Ansel Adams would not look at them and left the room. He had a strong aversion to color photography, maintaining that color had no legitimate place in the art of photography and that it degraded the medium. Amplifying his views later, he explained that color photography was too literal to be an art form, that it was not possible to practice it interpretively, and therefore that it was not creative, whereas the interpretive possibilities of black and white were unlimited." Gee, I always thought Ansel Adams was a nice guy. What can you do? But anyway, here's more Elliot Porter. Elliot Porter, it's beautiful, subtle. Yeah. Elliot Porter, Lake City, Colorado, 1957. Gorgeous stuff. And that book, In Wildness is the Preservation of the World, was a big hit, actually, in the early 60s, something like that. Yeah, because here 61. So in the 60s, it was a very popular coffee table book, and it was full of beautiful photographs. All right, shifting gears again. During the Depression, the U.S. Department of Agriculture established a photography project. In 1935, it was called the Resettlement Agency. and then it was under the Farm Security Administration, the FSA, from 1937 on. These New Deal agencies were established to combat rural poverty during the Depression era. And the photography project employed a team of photographers, including some very well-known people, Dorothea Lange, Walker Evans, and so on and so forth. Their goals were documentation and publicity, raising the awareness of poverty in America. And finally, towards the end, in World War II, one project was to document the internment of Japanese Americans, and that work was largely suppressed at the time. Walker Evans, there we go. Walker Evans, 1903 to 1975, is best known for his photos of Americana and the Depression. By the way, he's an alumnus of Phillips Academy, Andover, and he was passionate about modern art and literature. He co-authored a book, Now Let Us Praise Famous Men, with a text by James Agee, including 60 of his FSA photographs of Alabama in the 30s. And I have a quote about him, but I'm going to skip it. I like this. Dorothea Lange. Dorothea Lange was born in Hoboken, New Jersey. She was a polio victim at age 7, which affected her physically for life, but she was a very active, vibrant person. She studied photography at Columbia with Clarence White. She landed in San Francisco in 1918 and established a successful portrait studio. In 1933, the Depression had hit, and she started photographing his victims, first around San Francisco. This was, you read that this was the first of those photographs that she took, of the White Angel bread line in San Francisco in 1933. She worked for the RA and the FSA, documenting the social impact of the Depression and the Dust Bowl. She often worked with her second husband, agricultural economist Paul Taylor. She would drive to the devastated farmlands and migrant worker camps. And there she is, sitting on top of her car with this monstrous Graflex 4x5-inch negative camera. And with a camera like that, she could make a photograph like that. Migrant Mother in 1936 is an image that's probably familiar to everyone. She drove by a migrant camp in California at the end of her day. Then she decided to return to see it after all, and she found this mother with her 4 children in a makeshift tent. She made several other images of the family, but this is the one that told the story best. Remember, she was an accomplished portrait photographer, so she may have arranged these children a little bit. That's okay. That's okay. It's a great photograph. And I'll just rip through a bunch of pictures of hers from FSA. This is the one that the Ajay photograph reminded me of. So, yeah, well, I don't have to explain. Here's another one. She reminds me of my mother, although just visually. A formerly enslaved woman in Alabama in 1938. This is gorgeous on the plains. A hat is more than a covering, 1938.
Peter.
Yeah.
Campus Fusion.
Oh dear.
Time is flying.
Yes. How much more time do I have, do you think?
5 minutes.
5 minutes?
10.
10.
7.
10. All right, fine, 10. Here's her pictures of Japanese children about to be shipped off. I'm an American. A grandfather and his kids. And the kids. Photojournalism, Eric Solomon. I'm going to zip through stuff. He snuck into high-level meetings in Europe of diplomats. Here are the diplomats sleeping after a long day. Here are the diplomats after they just discovered him. We all have seen this many times. Ouija is a photographer for New York tabloids, and this is a woman accosting 2 wealthy people going to the opera. And this one is the Babe Bows Out, retiring Babe Ruth's number. Babe Ruth here is dying of throat cancer. In his old uniform, he leans on his bat as the stadium honors him. Even a Red Sox fan can go for this. It's gorgeous. And Muhammad Ali defeating Sonny Liston in 1965, Neil Leifer. Neil Leifer himself preferred this. This is Muhammad Ali defeating another person, Cleveland Williams, in 1966. He mounted a camera on the ceiling of the Astrodome. We've all seen Kent State. In its original form, this is the photograph uncropped. It was published cropped a lot, which makes it look a whole lot more like a much more threatening situation. This is a Boston thing, the soiling of Old Glory, where a teenager protester is attacking an African-American lawyer who's just going to a meeting at City Hall with a flag. This guy Salgado did lots of very dramatic photographs of things like oil fields and a gold mine in Brazil. Very dramatic. Here's another Duano photograph of him in 32 and in 47 holding the same camera in both pictures. Margaret Burke White got the cover photograph in 1938, I think. 1936, of Life magazine, the very first issue of Life magazine. And this is another one of her photographs. There's no way like the American way. Alfred Eisenstadt with Leicas dangling around his neck. Dr. Joseph Goebbels, which the Jewish photographer might be a little nervous about. He covered wars. He covered VJ Day at Times Square. Everybody's seen this. Children in Paris. Robert Capa, famous war photographer. This is from the Spanish Civil War. This is from the Normandy invasion. His thing was, if your pictures aren't good enough, you're not close enough. God damn it, yeah. And treating a German soldier. This is the last photograph he took before he was killed by stepping on a landmine when he was 41 years old. Henri Cartier-Bresson, the decisive moment. So his thing was, there's only one moment to press the shutter when the photograph is just right. And he was the expert and proponent of that sort of approach. Here's another one. And another one. I've got nothing to say about them. They're just fabulous. And here's one of children playing in a ruin in Spain. And the funny thing you find on the internet, here's a Lego reproduction of that photograph. Why isn't it color? I don't know. Cardinal Pacelli and Montmartre, Paris, people greeting him. This is kind of humorous, Sunday on the banks of the Marne. Not so humorous, exposing a Gestapo informer in 1945. And the Berlin Wall in 1962. This, for me, is a combination of sadness and humor. How'd these guys get up there and look like a statue? And this fabulous landscape in France. Gene Smith, W. Eugene Smith. This is towards the end of his life, and he's made a big mess by then. That's a photograph by Arnold Newman. He was the master of the photo essay. So he did a bunch of photo essays for Life magazine, which are just brilliant. And here's a couple of excerpts from them. There's one about the country doctor, and this one's from the Spanish village, where these are the national soldiers that everybody was afraid of. And a lovely photograph of the thread maker in the Spanish village. And this is the layout of the Spanish village. It's what it looked like, just to give you an idea. And there are those soldiers and the thread maker. And finally, the caption of this is, his wife, daughter, granddaughter, and friends have their last earthly visit with a villager. This photograph by Gordon Parks I just discovered in the New York Times last year. God, there's a whole thing I should read, but I don't have time. It's fabulous. The The color is great. The dignity of this woman and her young niece in the face of this colored entrance sign in 1956 is astonishing. It's good to find that if you're interested. A year ago, when was it? Yikes. Anyway, in the New York Times a year ago, they did a series of the 25 most important photographs, and I got a lot of this stuff out of that. Josef Karsh is a famous, a portraitist who was Canadian and Armenian, and he took portraits like this, which end up on postage stamps and bills. Arnold Newman, who we saw with his Ansel Adams picture, would be environmental portraiture. So here's Igor Stravinsky sitting at his piano with the lid of the piano looking like a musical note. And yeah, you all wanted another picture of Georgia O'Keeffe. There she is, by Arnold Newman. Philippe Halsman and Albert Einstein, that's probably also on some postage stamps. And he loved to make people jump, so Marilyn Monroe is jumping in the air. Here is Salvador Dali jumping in the air, but it's not just him. It's a bunch of water and several cats. So my question is, how many takes did that take, and what do the cats think? Man, they're not talking, right? Yeah. You probably had some other cats to use for the next one. Richard Avedon was a famous superstar, I call him, fashion photographer. Here's one example. Here's another one. You can't not like a picture with elephants. And then he did portraits of famous people. Marian Anderson, Ezra Pound, the poet, Malcolm X. What does this remind you of? It reminds me of Julia Margaret Cameron's portraits way back. Robert Frank, oh man. He was Swiss. He came to the United States in 1948, and in 1956, 5 or 6, he had a Guggenheim Fellowship to travel all over the country. So he got into his car, traveled all over the country, and took pictures everywhere in the 1950s. And so, but he took the pictures that he saw. So here he is. There's a trolley in New Orleans with the white people in front and the black people in the back. A convention hall in Chicago, a rough bar in Gallup, New Mexico, a car accident. Well, yeah, I guess somebody got killed in the car accident. And a road. That book is a classic. It's called The Americans. I have a copy of it here if you want to look at it. I so recommend it. It was revolutionary in its time because this is the 50s. This is not painting a picture of happy people in their prosperous homes. And there's, oh yeah, one more. That's a rodeo performer in New York City. If you want happy people in their happy homes, this book, The Family of Man, came out of an exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art. Incredibly popular. 250,000 people saw it there. And the book has sold 4 million copies, and it's still on display if you find yourself in Luxembourg. This picture is from that. Gary Winogrand, 1928 to 84, took this on Coney Island in New York. He was a great street photographer, which is kind of the tradition that came out of Robert Frank's work. And this is a very disturbing picture, the story of which I don't know, but he didn't either. And there's his shadow in the middle of the picture. And finally, I love this. You just can't say no to an elephant, you know? It's great. Danny Lyon, another street photographer, hung out with motorcycle gangs for a couple of years, several years actually, and did sort of the Robert Frank thing with motorcycle gangs there. I love this picture too. I couldn't not include it. Inga Marath. The interesting thing about her is she married Arthur Miller after Marilyn Monroe, so she must have been something. And then Vivian Meyer was unknown in her lifetime, but she created a large body of street photography while working as a nanny. And she never showed her pictures to anybody. It was just for her. And so here's her stuff. She liked to do self-portraits and mirrors. That girl is the star. I mean, she's just great. Look at that face. This is funny, but I don't know why. These are tough guys on the streets of New York. There she is, another self-portrait. She loves mirrors. She loves mirrors. And these guys have discovered something on the street. I'm not sure if they know what it is. There were experimental things going on. Harry Callahan did multiple exposures in Chicago. And Jerry Yulesman, here's the other photo montage. Jerry Yulesman was famous for these things. He was doing these sort of psychedelic photo montages in the 60s. Crazy. But he was very good at it. Diane Arbus, I learned it's Diane, not Diane. She was born in 1923 to a prosperous artistic family, studied with Berenice Abbott, visited Stieglitz, of course, won 2 Guggenheim Fellowships, and tragically she suffered from depression and committed suicide at the age of only 48. I don't know what she would have done beyond that. But her thing was photographing odd people. That's the best I can say. She did nudists, she did elderly people in Halloween costumes, she did people with problems. But she photographed, everyone she photographed knew that she was photographing them. So they were in it voluntarily. This is a child with a toy hand grenade in Central Park, New York City, 1962. They're identical twins, but they're not really identical. They're different. A boy with a straw hat waiting to march in a pro-war parade in 1967, bomb Hanoi on his button there. 2 girls in matching bathing suits, Coney Island, 1967. How on earth did she get them to pose for her? I can't imagine. And a Jewish giant at home with his parents in the Bronx, 1970. Her stuff is controversial, clearly, and still is controversial. There was just a huge exhibit of just about everything she ever did in New York, like 400 pictures, and it was amazing to see. I have a few examples of modern landscape work. Stephen Shore did large format color. Here's in 1974 his first book, Uncommon Places, North Adams, Massachusetts. That looks like it, doesn't it? Bernd and Hiller Becher were Germans, a husband-wife team, and their thing was industrial stuff. So they would do these arrays of factories, which all probably did similar things or the same thing, but were different. Interesting. Joel Meyerowitz on the Cape. Joel Meyerowitz wrote a book called St. Louis and the Arch, in which every picture has a little bit of the arch in it someplace. Richard Misrach is a current guy. This land person that invented instant photography, I'm not going to tell you Jennifer's story. But do serious people use Polaroid material? Of course they do. And Maria Cosindus, in the 60s, we all knew her work. Gorgeous, taking advantage of the characteristics of the Polaroid film. And Lucas Samaras did this sort of manipulation of a Polaroid print. And David Hockney did this big array of SX70 pictures. And good old Elsa Dorfman with her 20 by 24 camera. I love how everybody who works with 20 by 24 likes the raggedy edges. They never crop it down. William Wegman, we all know him too, with his Weimar honors. 5 generations of dogs. The first one was named Man Ray. and then Fay Ray, and I don't know the rest of them. Mary Ellen Mark, who's become a big favorite of mine lately, did some work with 20 by 24. She achieved an amazingly dignified photograph of this high school prom couple, black and white. So, all right, that's all I got about Polaroid. Mary Ellen Mark, though, did a lot of good stuff. This is Tiny in her Halloween costume. She got to know this girl, really a girl, like a 14-year-old girl who was on the streets in Seattle with a bunch of other kids, living as prostitutes and drug dealers. It's terrible, but she dressed up in her Halloween costume that day. And she followed her, Tiny, for as long as Mary Ellen Mark lived, and photographed her a lot. There are 2 films about this woman. One about her in this time, and another about her later on as an adult. They're really good films and interesting to see. Again, you can't resist an elephant. Rampakar Singh with his elephant, Shayana. Look at, you can't see it from there, but the eye on that elephant is unbelievable. It is upstaging everything. And this is Clayton Moore, the former Lone Ranger. She came to his house to photograph him. She was surprised that he was dressed up in his costume. And he wouldn't get out of his costume. And finally, for Mary Ellen Mark, a dancing clown in Mexico. Nicholas Nixon had an annual project. Every year he would take a large format portrait of his wife and her 3 sisters, all in order. So I'll give them to you in 10-year gaps. So here they are in 1975, 85, 95, 2005, 2014, 2022. The second from the right is his wife, but it doesn't matter. All in the Massachusetts area, actually. Harold Edgerton, we've all seen his stuff. The legendary MIT professor, sort of goes back to Edgerton. No, to what's his name, Muybridge, because he was taking pictures of fast things with the with a photographic strobe that he had invented, and allowing us to see things that we couldn't otherwise see. There, and there, and there. So those are just more technical things. Digital photography, not going to talk about that. Here's an example of a young non-Western photographer. I feel bad because all of these are Western photographers, and I am almost done, really. Pictures like this show up in Aperture magazine. I've got a copy, the latest copy, which is about Korean photography, and this young man in South Africa takes beautiful pictures, presumably digital, of his family in South Africa. And cell phone cameras, that's what's happened to cameras. You see that little period at the end of the sentence there? That's a cell phone camera. There's the lenses inside it. And the amazing thing is that you can just do things with a cell phone camera now because of all the processing that goes on that are very difficult to do with a real camera. And this picture of a handheld picture of northern lights is not something you can just easily do with a regular camera, but with a cell phone, sure, no problem. Okay, we're almost done. Here's another Robert Duano photograph or 2. This is a giant wedding party in France, lovely, and then they're gone. And honest to goodness, here's my last slide. This is the first image that Gene Smith took after he was injured in Okinawa. He came back home and took him a while to recover. These are his 2 kids, the first image that he took. So thank you for watching and listening to this. I do have these 3 or 4 books, if anybody's interested. One of them is Ansel Adams' Polaroid work, and there's the Weston thing. There's a copy of Aperture, and oh yes, the Americans. if anybody wants to just see what they're like.
Peter, thank you very much. Couple of quick comments. We'll turn on the lights and let you leave. When you leave, please leave your badges on the desk outside. A reminder. Mark on your calendar May 18th next year for the spring reunion, the annual meeting. And anybody who's interested in participating, helping in any of the projects that we mentioned, and some of the ideas that surfaced during our first discussion this morning, please chat with one of us about how you might help and what we can do. Thanks again. Hope to see you soon.
Sorry for taking so long.